It really depends where you are. As we saw, Mandalay and Naypyidaw, the police have used some quite violent tactics to disperse protesters. But in Yangon, where I am, it's still really a kind of a festive atmosphere, I would say, even more so today. I had a walk down into the downtown area before, and there's people dressed up and a lot of people taking selfies. But as we saw yesterday in those two cities, Mandalay and Naypyidaw, the police will use force if they need to disperse protesters.
Yes, indeed. Quite a contrast to the images that we saw yesterday. What incidents have you witnessed or learnt about from other local media that have really taken the country by surprise?
Certainly the shooting yesterday really escalated things. I mean, that was the first time that we'd seen live ammunition used. And I mean, even before yesterday, we hadn't seen rubber bullets used. So I think that's shocked quite a lot of people. And we've seen a response from the protesters in those cities. They're using kind of different tactics today and not being so confrontational with the police, not going really to the same locations they were at yesterday, where you had a large number, tens of thousands of people in Mandalay facing off with police at one spot. Today, they're more moving around the city in groups. There's monks are leading the protest today, which will, encourage the police to use more restraint, shall we say. So we're not seeing the same confrontations that we saw yesterday, and that's because the protesters are using different tactics. There's still a lot of people out on the streets. Here in Yangon as well. I mean, it's still tens of thousands of people. They're quite dispersed. A lot of them are moving around constantly, so it's hard to say exactly how many. But we haven't seen a huge drop in the number of people out protesting.
And how unprecedented is what police are faced with? What might explain why they might be resorting to violence?
I mean, the response is not unprecedented at all in Myanmar. I mean, there's a long history of police and military violently suppressing demonstrations, and also a long history of protests against military rule. I think possibly what's been surprising is that it took quite a few days to get to this point where police did open fire and did use quite water cannon and rubber bullets and so on. The protests have been building since Saturday. And I mean, I think that most people were probably surprised that there wasn't any confrontations earlier, and surprised today as well that the atmosphere is, as I said, quite festive, not very tense. And I mean, it's people are still coming out onto the streets because of that. So
it looks like they really aren't deterred. What are protesters saying? How long do you think these demonstrations will continue for?
There's no sense from the protesters that I've spoken to that they're thinking of stopping their protest, and it's quite hard to see how this really ends. I mean, there's no sense from the military that there's going to be a back down either to these demands, which is to free Aung San Suu Kyi, to restore democracy and to end military rule. But the military government, unlike possibly military governments in the past, is trying to show restraint because it wants to show that it is different from in the past. It's often talked about how this seizure of power was legal, it was constitutional, and it's going to be business as usual. The country is going to move forward and continue to attract investment. And so to violently crack down on protesters would undermine that argument and the kind of impression that they want to give domestically and to the rest of the world. So they're using restraint for now, and we hope that continues.
Indeed. Thomas, who are the protesters? What age group do most of them belong to? Are they workers, civil servants? Tell us more.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. It's such a wide range. It's students, mostly young people in downtown Yangon today when I was there, but at other areas we're seeing workers, civil servants joining what's called the civil disobedience movement, which is where they were refusing to work under the military government. Some of them are also coming out onto the streets to protest as well. And we also see some people in the private sector doing the same. So you've got factory workers as well, construction workers out on the streets. Even in some areas, police are joining the demonstrators. Today in Kia State, on the border with Thailand, 49 police came out and protested, and their colleagues tried to arrest them later in the day, and they're now in hiding and being sheltered by pro-democracy demonstrators. So we're really seeing a large range of people come out onto the streets. And also, it's not just the number of people on the streets. As they're marching through the streets, walking through the streets, people are coming out of their homes to express support. People are driving around, giving the three-finger salute, which is kind of the symbol of the protest, to show their support. So it's really a large number of people and a very broad cross-section of society.
Thomas, really good to get your insights there. Thanks so much.
Thank you.